Hey guys, I am back and today I am going to be doing a review on a new palette to my collection, which is the Buxom Boss Babe Dolly palette. I got this as a gift from my mom. Here is a sneak peek of what the palette looks like on the inside. I am going to jump into 5 different looks using these shades. And break down the palette a little bit, and then I will go in at the end and give you my final thoughts after having used it for about a week. It's 5 looks, so it didn't all happen in 5 consecutive days, but I have been playing with this palette for, I feel like, a good amount of time. So the outer packaging resembles the inner packaging in aesthetic. It was really easy to remove. It has all of the names of the shades on the back. So the shades in order that I swatched them are Silk Sheets, Drippin', Last Call, Mink Magnet, Top Shelf, After Party, A-List, On Ice, Spoiled Sexy, High Society, Trust Fund, and Wild Nights. This is a continuation of their Dolly theme. The Dolly is kind of a shade theme, like NARS has Orgasm and Becca had Champagne Pop, and Tarte has Park Avenue Princess. Like it's kind of a color, a mauve-y color that they use for a bunch of different things. I do have the Dolly lip gloss. This is a product that I am trying to pan, or product I wanted to pan in 2023. I'll link that video down below if you're curious about what products I'm trying to use up this year. I have the Dolly Danger Plump Line Lip Liner, which again, kind of a pinky mauve. And then I used to have the Dolly Danger eyeshadow palette. They have these 6-pan eyeshadow palettes. Their original setup where you could very easily buy single shades and swap them out. So I no longer have the full palette, but I do have these 3 shades. I have Wild Nights, which is this one right here. I have Silk Sheets, I believe, and yeah, this is another Silk Sheets. So I am going to compare those 2 in the original formula to the shades in here. They look pretty similar to me. Maybe the newer palette and then the older. Maybe the newer one's a little bit more golden or like less icy, but I bet they would look exactly the same in a finished eye look. And then the shade Wild Nights, new is going to be on top, old is on the bottom of these swatches. They're, oh, that's hard. I feel like they're basically the same. There doesn't seem to be any sort of like difference in formula. They are about the same level of pigment, shininess, etc. So if you do have the old palette, I believe the shades Silk Sheets, Mink Magnet, Spoiled Sexy, and Wild Nights are all going to be dupes from that original palette. But as you can see, the packaging, the colors, all of this kind of lands in that pinky mauve category as well. So at the end, I will compare it to a couple other palettes that I have in my collection that I think are similar color stories. And I feel like I have done all of kind of the preliminary work on this palette, so I'm going to jump straight into the looks. Okay, so I just swatched everything for the first time, and I think I want to dip into this one and maybe this like brown with gold mica and put, I don't know, maybe the Spoiled Sexy shade in the crease. I think that might be what I do. So I might try and stick to more of the browns, and then see if I can do something more pink later. Okay, so here is how the look turned out. I'm really happy with it. I think that this shade Drippin' is really beautiful and textured and adds a lot of sparkle to the look. I took Spoiled Sexy in the crease, High Society in the outer corner, both of these along the lower lash line, and then Last Call over the lid with a little bit of Drippin' kind of on the center of the lid. So that is what I did today. I think this is the like only way to get a peachy look is by using like Last Call, because the rest of them are quite plum or pink. But I am curious to play. I want to try and use at least every shade once, or every shade at least once. But I will be back with another look. Okay, for my second look, I think I want to play with this shade. This looks pretty. It's the shade On Ice. Okay, so I feel like the shade Wild Nights would make a better liner if I wet it, so I will probably try that next time. The shade After Party did fine in the crease. I think it looks nice. It blended really easily. I have no problems there. The shade On Ice, I feel like I had to dip into it a lot, but it was a nice opacity, so it doesn't like spread very well, but it is very pigmented, if that makes any sort of sense. You know, shades where like it's like really, really good, but then it only goes so far. I guess like not a lot builds up on your finger. And then I topped it off with a little bit of Drippin' because that shade is my new obsession, and I love how sparkly it makes everything, and I will probably put it on everything for the rest of time. I will be right back with the next look. Okay, for my third look, I haven't played with the shades Mink Magnet, Top Shelf, and I have played with On Ice. So these are the two shimmers that I haven't played with yet. I think I'm gonna go in with After Party and Trust Fund and build that up in the outer corner. Maybe, yeah, I'll do After Party and Trust Fund, and then I think I'm gonna go in with top shelf right there. So here is the finished look. I'm really happy with it. I feel like this Trust Fund shade pulls more like cool toned violet, at least on me, than it looks in the pan. In the pan it looks a little bit more burgundy. It may just be the tones surrounding it that kind of make it pull that way. Top shelf was not that impressive in the swatch, I feel like, but on my lids it looks really pretty. As you can see, we have Mink Magnet, Top Shelf, On Ice, and Drippin'. And Drippin' is really the one with the most like texture and dimension. Mink Magnet does have some sparkle in it, but I feel like the other two, they're really pretty, but they're more subtle. So I am back. It's kind of the end of the day, but I was going to see how it worked using the shade Wild Nights as a liner. I have a little bit of the shade Publisher from my Pan That palette that I put on this morning like eons ago, so I'm just going to leave that as it is. It's pretty faded, and I want to see how it works to use these shades as liners with like a wet brush. So okay, I feel like that turned out pretty good. I'm gonna take this like flat shader brush and I'm gonna pick up a little bit of Trust Fund, this one, and just smudge it into my lower lash line. And then I'm just gonna take Silk Sheets in the inner corner. Okay, there we go. Look 4. Really just a quick test of the wettability of these shadows, but I think this was a success. We shall see. And the shadow didn't get super janky either, which is good. I didn't use a ton of setting spray though. So I will be back to play with the last few shades of this palette. Okay, I am going to jump into the last look that I'm going to show using this Boss Babe Dolly palette. I wanted to really quickly go through my other kind of similarly toned palettes. So I have the Urban Decay Naked Cherry and my Huda Beauty New Nude, and see if I can find any similar swatches. I'm not going to do this for too long, maybe just 2 or 3 shades in this Buxom palette, and just see if there's anything comparable. So I'm going to start with the shade Mink Magnet, and I think the closest shade in Huda Beauty New Nude is Charmed, and then the closest shade in Urban Decay Naked Cherry is Turn On. So those are those 3 right there. They're very different in tone, I would say. but it is interesting that all three of these palettes has kind of like a bronzy shade to it. Then maybe a little bit better of a comparison, the shade A-List compared to the shade Tickle in Huda Nude and Feels in Urban Decay Naked Cherry. Again, not quite the same, but if you have one of these and you're like looking at this Buxom palette, you're like, is it that different? By the time you get it on the eye. So, Trust Fund, Spanked, and Devilish. Those are all quite different. Let's see how Trust Fund looks next to Love Bite. Okay, so it's like much more like kind of almost true violet compared to Love Bite and the other burgundies, which I find interesting. I feel like when I look at this shade in the pan, it looks burgundy compared to the shadows that are next to it, and then when I actually go to use it, it turned my look much more purple than I was expecting. So that was an interesting kind of sidebar, I guess. I do want to compare Drippin' to the shade Crave from Huda Beauty Nude. Crave is obviously much more gold, but they both are very sparkly. And then, is there any other shades that kind of are calling my attention? Oh, I wanted to swatch Last Call next to Bang Bang from the Naked Cherry palette. Okay, those two are actually pretty similar, I feel. Okay, so there's a couple dupes. There's definitely themes that go throughout all three of these palettes. I think I have often felt like if you have the Huda Beauty Nude, then you do not need the Urban Decay Naked Cherry. I prefer this one. I think that it does have more shadows, so obviously you're gonna have more versatility from that. But I feel like the different tones of mattes, you've got peaches and burgundies and these like pinky browns. Anyways, I felt like this is more versatile. I would say between these two palettes, I'm not sure. It's hard for me to say this is new and shiny. I've been playing with it a lot lately. I really like it. I very recently dipped into this for my palette spotlight series and remembered why I love it so much. I think they're both great palettes. I would say frankly, how many eyeshadow palettes does a person really need? That's up to you. If you already have this and a bunch of other palettes that look like this color story, I don't know if I would say you need this one, but if you had this, really loved it, used up all of the shades out of it that you wanted to, and now you're looking at this as kind of a new similar thing, but you didn't use like the glitters and stuff out of this palette, then this may be actually a really good option, given that it's a little bit less textured, a little bit more approachable, I would say, with the different formulas. There's fairly easy to blend mattes, metallics are pretty creamy. This one's a little bit textured, this Drippin' shade, but that's pretty much it. The one thing that these other two palettes in front of me have that this doesn't is a matte cream shade. In some of these like speed up videos, you may have seen me reaching into my Smashbox Covershop matte palette, which is my Pan That palette this year, for the cream matte shade called Assistant. And that's because occasionally I would blend too far out, and I use those kinds of shades to clean up my outer edge. Now, some people really dislike it when a palette doesn't have a matte cream shade. Obviously, I do use them, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend that they're completely useless for me, but I also don't have any problem reaching into my Tarte Park Avenue Princess palette, just taking my loose powder, reaching for another eyeshadow palette, like finding that cream shade somewhere else. So unless that's super important to you, I don't really think that's really make or break on this palette. I'm really happy with how all of the looks turned out. I think this turned out really pretty. I do think that the three different like mid-toned crease shades make this palette more versatile for me than the Urban Decay Naked Cherry palette. The Naked Cherry palette really only has 2 crease shades, and I feel like the 3 different crease shades helps. And then we've got kind of 2 like deepening shades, and then the rest are metallics to play with, and I think that's not quite half and half matte and metallic, which is usually what I think I prefer, but it works for me. I'm definitely holding on to this palette. I did think it was really fun to play with. I'm excited to reach for it again. I'm curious to see what you thought of all of the looks that I did in this video. I'm still very drawn towards this shade. I really love the shade On Ice, and I think that I'm excited to play more with this Wild Night shade. I think that it's really, really beautiful and somewhat unique in my collection. Actually, is it similar to Kinky from, see, yeah, even the metallic burgundy in the new nude palette, they're quite different. This one's definitely much more pink. Anyways, I feel like I have demonstrated this palette to its full capacity. I will link it down below in case you are curious, but I think that this is a fun palette. I don't know if everyone needs to immediately run out and buy it, but despite that, I do think I will enjoy using this. So that is everything that I have for today's video. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like these kind of videos, please let me know so that I can do more of them. And other than that, I hope you're having an incredible, awesome day wherever you are, and that I get to see you in a future video. Thanks, guys!